Um, I want to read a little poem I wrote this morning when I was thinking about pharmaceuticals and brain scanners. Now, uh, yeah, yeah, um, yeah. It seems that to make a brain scan and an actual mind scan, it is necessary to invoke the detection of gravitons, which is difficult. And although detectors are put either side of the Earth, putting them within the mind would be difficult. However, the well-known quantum Hall effects in 2D and now 4D seem to suggest that these gravitons are a feature of that in the quantum level, as understood, for example, either in higher twistors or twistors themselves, and indeed in the non-commutative geometries, which is also related to uh, uh, quantum gravitation, and also the Riemann hypothesis, actually, and number theory. All these things coming together in that theory. However, does that theory have a proper fine structure? Certainly a proper homotopy, a cohomology of Hochschild. It looks essentially at putting together passages of moving strips when embedded in three dimensions, or non-commutative circles where the end is twisted at the end to make the beginning. So yeah, those things are similar. So to essentially to understand a brain scan, you need to increase the level of cooperation in games, if you want to call it game theory. In fact, it would be a combinational game theory. So yeah, those things would all be the same. Uh, Graphene is known to be a 2D quantum Hall effect where if the if one puts a patient or a volunteer or a person in a normal brain scan and it gradually increases the magnetic field rather than boosting all at once, then if you have a graphene array in your brain scanner, in your brain, you've dissolved it in the organic compounds that it will dissolve in the blood. And you augment that graphene with the normal SSRI medication, which should be possible because it's highly adaptive to electrons coming in because it's got a slight insufficiency. Then that several layers of that graphene should in fact be able to resonate, and that resonation will in fact, I believe anyway, I believe that it will in fact control the polarity or the non-commutativeness of the water filters necessary to release of oxygen and their propagation to the chemical effects through the iterated ultrasounds. Now, side effects maybe just assume the side effects are the kidney for start. Got this filtration system going on in the blood. Now, it could be that a single individual, the polarity or the stereomers of these SSRIs which are known to be steroids, are in fact reversed for both the water solubility, which would be in the cells of the neuron, and the filtration system of the blood, which is in the blood. These two things could just by accident, in the formation of a particular individual through genetics, etc., and environment, these could be this could be put the wrong way. And so once the chemical of SSRI is in the body, then it may actually have had adverse effects in a unified mind of a matroid theory of universes, and that may actually have a different effect on the brain and the kidney. So you'll just develop the the turbulences which would occur through the whole body, as thought as united in a single mind, would actually be quite different. And you would basically get a load of gunk in your blood and it will cause side effects in the kidney and the other regions of the body. That is the undesigned effect. The tablets may work, but they are mitigated, etc., by these side effects, which a psychiatric patient for 30 years becomes an analysis of his side effects rather than his actual mental health condition or psychological difficulties. And that is why psychiatry is a complete and utter mess. Anyway, the poem Fullerene Graphene Pharmaceutics. Oh, Fullerene aroma, who collapses into the 4D quantum Hall effects in gravity's magnetic encephalogram, touched for the very first time like a virgin. Flying turbulences direct nanotubes of quetiapine into 108 degrees of pentagon apoptosities, unwrapping the cell's dopamine if I believed an intervention is gone. My psychoses of living unwrapped in stationary towers into SSRIs, the refocalizing consolidated by relative sleep and the sleep of understanding. Oh, gravitons detected by churn numbers, mind scanning Barmadik, ich habe genug, the 6 yogas of tantric sex mornings, of love larval egos extending the phenotypes. Come home, Kathy, come home now to my resonances in SP2 orbitals. Come home now. Well, that's a fun. Yeah. So what have I got here? I've written a few notes down. I want to talk about the Fourier Mukai graphene and the Fourier scan. Yeah, this is it. I mean, the it's been noted last week actually in a paper or in August 2025 somewhere. I've kind of looked at and well, it shows that basically these fluorine compounds of balls, it means fluorine hockey balls of C60 with their pentagon structure mixed by hexagon, same as a football with carbon atom, the circular football. Well, they exhibit 4D quantum Hall. Now, the twisted paper in America basically proved or observed in 2005 that 4D quantum Hall effects are indeed related to twisters in 6 dimensions with 2 different time dimensions that would in fact, as I observed yesterday, would in fact be the Calabi-Yau transport between glacial twisters and string theory with the Fourier Mukai transform and the glacial X transform. So yeah, the that suggests that basically the resolution should be with these graphs to, uh, Fullerene molecules, and each time as the magnetic field increases in time, in time as an fMRI machine actually with the in the bold effect, they did this bold effect. It's similar, it's a surrogate to bold effect, and that would resonate and give the two-dimensional quantum Hall effect, which would be controlled by serotonin. So quetiapine is known to have antidepressant effects, as used as an addition augmentation of SSRIs. And my idea is that basically these effects are being caused by the breakdown through the pulsing of the 4D and the 2D arrays of the fullerene into graphene sort of molecules. Yeah, and well, yeah, I think there's a resonance of the electrons like that, the sp2 orbitals, etc. And these planes are formed quite regularly, and because you're increasing the scanner magnetizations at 9 Tesla perhaps from naught, then you'll get these discrete bumps, and these discrete bumps will not only release the quetiapine as appended to the graphene and the fullerene, but it will in fact enable the reconciliation of the mind through the unification in the synapses of gravitational force as detected and pulsed by the quantum Hall effects in the synapses, which is a small will have quantum effects, and I believe that in sanity, these are in fact very well balanced in the free energy systems that Kristen, etc., have discussed as a whole brain, but there are worlds within worlds, and these dopamine systems and serotonin systems they will form. In fact, spin glasses, if you've got a good flow system with the nebulous states, which you should have with the reuptake is very important. Now, I've been observing yesterday that basically there seems to be a duality in the twister transform in the twisters. Yeah. Now that I don't know isn't thought of that much often in the literature available. Maybe mentioned, but basically you can either have a flat space time with a metric on it that forms from a supercompact up in the large cardinal hierarchy of the ordinals with their models and mice. And they collapse down into these systems of ever increasingly dense quadratic pairs, which are twisted pairs of S2U2 when used with the usual Minkowski metric. And yeah, so what would be happening there? But we got the duality there because there's a duality in there. And I think the duality has not been noticed. I believe that normal twisters and spinners, and also to an extent these string theory, is using basically a pattern of of maximum determinacy models with, in fact, two successive large cardinal, measurable cardinals within that. But I think those two could actually be dualized by one, a gap and a one. And nothing, anything further, one gets a quagmire of matter. But what happens, I believe, is that black holes are formed, whatever, when they're released by the formation of a higher topology, a shared topology in the next round. And essentially, that 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 that, that's what happens. And um, yeah, so well, yeah, so well, yeah, so so yeah, yeah. Anyway, um, in all this, you need to know the difference between what is virtual, actual, potential, and real. This was a distinction made by Deleuze in the 1970s, and it was based to an extent on, indeed, Henry Bergson's work, in particular his matter and mind, his creative evolution, etc. The place where he destroyed Einstein's argument faculty, but then capitulated for some odd reason in his simultaneity things, in his jury simultaneity things, which is all to do with the spin glasses, which in normal affairs is driven by Navier-Stokes equations on the phase transitions of the game theory, cooperative game theory. This game theory actually goes up all the way up to the high of the ordinals through the surreals, and it's a surreals versus the continuum. That is the continuum versus the surreal number. The potential would be the surreal. Certainly, that is the causal nexus in many ways, with all its ultrafilters and bicommutative ones which go down and up in the causal nexus of Whitehead. Beautiful structure. That structure is actually over the caring higher logics is actually structured very nicely. In fact, it's structured by Riemann hypothesis, extended Riemann hypothesis. Quite beautiful stuff, really. I know that Berry or whatever in Bristol kind of did some stuff about Riemann hypothesis and so the physical process of it. It is actually true, except you need the higher plenums, not just a flat space time, but these higher logic. Now, what are these higher logics? It can actually be observed that these higher logics are, in fact, what is being done in the whole school of infinity topos theory and category theory. And in fact, if you develop them from the original growth and deep topology, then what the fine structure is saying, people working, is in fact that in that higher structure, one has actually natural number objects. So things are all in the fine structure. Otherwise, like it seems, if you don't have a natural number operator, and this would come from the previous level, I believe, of subcompact cardinals in the non-commutative sense being present, then they would be they would not not they would not obey the following structure. And in fact, if sufficiently many subcompact carbons are present, for example, a stationary number of subcompact carbons which are themselves subcompact, then I would suggest that yeah, the basic overspill lemma of the first order fragments of arithmetic is actually false, which is quite a big deal because it's the most fundamental thing in the study of non not non-standard bonds with the two filters. And if the filters don't add up to anything, and you can't press an uncountable number of the horizontal level of non-standard bonds of it together into an overspill. When something true on all the things below the first infinity is actually true above it, then the whole theory of non-standard bonds of infinity falls to pieces. I like to see what happens exactly. So everything's connected in this theory of maths anyway. So yeah, the virtual with pulsing into the one becomes many, the one becomes many in essentially what is essentially what is it is essentially the one becomes many of Whitehead, the branchings, the Tuesday make many types by what I have described as a stationary tower forcing with non-commutative fine structure and doing the omega steps on omega. Now, if they all cohere, that's a good measure, and that does produce a pulse, and that pulse can be considered as, in many ways, the next uh, intellectual cognition that overlaps with the initial aim supplied only by God in his causal nexus. On previous occasions, doesn't start and it was an end and it was just this. Is it? Well, yeah, so the actual basically pulse people get many was one, and then horizontally again they all fall into a new one. And if the derived lemma is correct, then that is actually a prayer. The problem with the prayers is it's interrupted by these subcompact cars, which may be below subcompact or above Williams. I don't know, but that is what's ripping the cause of efficacy apart and of the causal nexus. And what actually happens is you need diamond sequences, diamonds over or diamonds within. If you shoot a diamond up then you destroy the ones within. And if you look at the difference between the hyperbolic and the planar or the Riemannian metrics, then there are jewels in the spinning theory. And what is happening there? What is happening in many ways is because of the scale of the brain, the brain, all the connections are usually perhaps from different levels, very complicated thing in a particular university, which is embedded within universities through the matroid axiom that govern the propagation of the phyla in actually the dendrites through to the axons. So that's very interesting. So yeah, so so yeah. So yeah, the potential real is just that what's in the continuum at that particular point, and it's very important for the next sleep function, either real sleep over the whole brain or the whole of life, the whole of the universe, etc. The universe is in this point where the natural numbers close up into to each other, like in Hellman's original ideas quite a few years ago of structural mathematical basis of mathematics of the foundation. And he did, in fact, isolate a diamond and a square, kind of all these branches, and then put them all, yeah. So diamonds and square with diamonds, possibility of necessity. And it's strange that Jensen did call the diamond principle diamond and the square principle square. Anyway, that's it. They are, in fact, like Hampkin's universes, multiverses, which, because each set theory has a ring theory non-commutatively inside it, which have actually been proven to have some relationship, tentative at least, between them. And I think it will be quite a strong relationship actually between them, very strong actually. And you will find that in our prayers, in our thoughts, these actually give rise to possibilities of physical manifestation or what is called hope, I imagine, hope within, yeah, and to the outside. So, yeah, we have to understand that. Or now, yeah. So yeah, you need a Jensen coding for these non-commutative fine structures. Whether one can build a model with them, I don't quite know. It will be interesting to see if there is actually a non-commutative model And that would be the mind of the thoughts, the mind emanating the thoughts. The thoughts, we need through quite a bit to do that, and I'm not actually doing it yet. But that looks at it. I mean, the thing would be the terminus relationships are very poor on the languages of non-communicative fine structure. And that should be no different, except, of course, what one would desire is that each mouse has the same core as many others, and not just in a line, but anything within a non-commutative sense. Well, that should be okay. So the turbulence theory should be fundamentally improving the comparison limit, even if that comparison isn't, and the coiteration indices are in fact implicit, because they're implicit because they're on a particular um, trajective, well ordering of certain complexity, particularly the first complexity. So yeah, so no. So you can imagine in the real world these hyperbolic spaces would in fact be quite nice. They are where the ADS CFT works, and that is when basically Fristen's Markov blankets must to actually work, and they fit together. Otherwise, one has horrible, not to say horrible work. One has basically what is called holograms in the brain of it, non-real things, virtual things, which is basically where spirituality comes. Spirituality is a way of defining new cosmologies over the ordinal, and it is a very interesting thing. It's what spirituality is. It's a higher cosmology based not on triangles and squares, but in fact on infinite sequences of ordinals. The difference between an ordinal and a natural number is very important as a closure the natural numbers clock. And I would suspect that you can define a probability measure, that's something that changes over time, and the probability measure itself changes. And this would tend to one that our cardinals become almost always ordinals as the world becomes. That is a distinction there. What? I don't know. So now you can say that in fact the order arithmetic tends to the cardinal arithmetic as the universe increases, as God understanding, as light with a capital L, forming out of the infinity spheres, does in fact tend to itself, and that can be considered as God praying with empathy for his own defects. Defects manifested in the world, which becomes perfect, as mathematics becomes a dialogue between itself, a negative and positive dialogue, indeed, not necessarily out. And that actually becomes, through the negative and positive, a dissociative, in many ways, a dissociative idea of non-law-like aesthetics, which actually will then become the real norm for mathematics, or something going belief that the whole universe escapes like this and dialecticizes both negatively and positively, unified by the love at the end, or whatever you call it. I mean, I think Rudolf Steiner would call it physical body, etheric body, astral body, and what he calls the I. This I comes over you, it comes over you, comes over you. Which I read in a poem the other day about magazines. It was influenced by this, can't find it at the moment, but yeah, it was about the things, many one come into one and then unify. Now, the interesting point of that is, of course, that given an infinity gap, infinity morass, which haven't been defined yet, but will be defined using non-commutative fine structure, if it all holds, if the mind of God is in fact loosened and projects down sufficiently on a final segment of iteration trees, and that would actually, be a new model, I suppose. It's not the fine structure, it will be a new model of that non-commutative sense, and that will be the maximal model, the most beautiful thing in motion of thought, maybe, and reflecting down onto our thought. And yeah, that would be very interesting. That structure, just like the among tilings on the plane, and other tilings, they will have, in fact, they will have in fact a quantum gravitational coding with gravitation which takes place as over ultrafilters, which I love in Douglas Ghost's sense, ever increasing with the world as ever. And how do these defects occur as sort of compacts, which are these non-suiting trees and suiting trees or iterating? So it is a fact, I believe, that in the end of the world, these schizophrenic arms are there to scaffold, basically. They're not there for loving things. But when they interact with something that is manic, then yes, they do indeed become dissociative. The most beautiful thing. That is why beauty is truth. Truth is beauty, together with actually morality, I'm afraid, and also love at the end. Yeah, that's very nice. So yeah, as I said before, in the analysis of graph theory, you get these five colours and five colours. You knock them together through coiteration. Coiteration should be okay. I think we'll have Dodgers and level at that level, and in fact, it'll all go up. And what are those actual graphs? They are joules. They're formed by Joule spinors, not discussed that often over the hyperbolic. So one will be hyperbolic, and one will actually be the planar. They'll be joined together. Quite nice kind of stuff, really. Yeah, yeah, I don't know quite how it would work. I don't know how quite envisage it. And on top of that, there are the five topological manifestations of that through the M10 to the M50 so the question of Foucault is actually more interesting than it sounds, solved by computers for the computable graphs. But there are five ones anyway. The five ones which are basically the iteration of the hybrid against itself in the mega game of finite games, basically, on the plane. So, yeah, I mean, we will need Jensen coding to leave non-communicable ones essentially to get, yeah, to to get these reels, yeah, over the four model, I guess just an awkward model, you get these reels and they're structured by the predicate at the top that you're approximating in the coding of the universe, and you'll get those more and more times, more and more times. But the fact is, I mean, it's actually unique, Well, is it? Is it actually unique if you're actually understanding the proper the proper mentality that's going on in a non-community fight. So is that actually unique, or do you produce nice combinations of dual spinner pairs, which is just two bars followed by an undefinable one at a particular level infinitely often for each branch of a wooden tree or a tripper domain. Yeah, tripper domains at that level will have a unique end measure or ideal. That's what they're defined by as in valuation domains, what they're derived. And so you get the yeah, you get things at the top where they're memberships of themselves, and they are in fact the natural sum structure will be a perfectoid nocturnian in many ways. Once you get particular richness of the world where you're actually coiterating eight things together, three in their relationships. Oh, yeah. So non-associative, non-commutative things with their dualities. And the dualities will in fact occur between this hyperbolic system, base space, on the Riemannian black holes, and that's quite interesting. It suggests that in fact madness occurs, madness occurs chemically, when in fact uh, the reuptake, I'm afraid, is is a little fast, and then you're shoving serotonin and dopamine back more than you got. Really. You're getting more than you back, and this will produce these strange things, and the boundary of these things will become rather concave. You will shoot back these things, and that is madness. It's how madness flips. One flips a lid, and it's that duality. It can be seen also in love between how two people can fall if they are perfectly dual in this way, they become antagonistic if they're not in love. And all the branches merely mingle for the worse. But if they mingle the best, you get a beautiful beauty basically this emanates out of the space one element of times what his self his defects or his events from the previous day once consolidated into the space time of his new structure, and that is entangling of two human beings together through their electrons. Now the question is, can we actually calculate the actual can we actually calculate the actual mass of electron, or may calculate the charge of this electron, but the mass of electron would be a different matter, and it would be interesting. It would, in fact, be related to the criteria and the calculation in a non-commutative sense of the second uniformly descendable, which some work has been done in the communicator. That would actually be in some sense, at least, an absolute measure of the mass of electron in in terms of numbers. All these numbers will actually become, indeed, I believe, in the system, in the total system, which is unifying the natural numbers iterated itself to itself so that anything autofills you can actually add to that are prayers and they are themselves already contained in the system. So God does not change, although it becomes more perfect. If that is sensible. The praying all the prayers into as the many become one, shoot out into the same thing. It's rather nice. And it will give pure light over the capital L, which is what I believe Fichte was talking about in 1805. His fishing shuttle there, and the science of knowing. It's quite a good book actually. The other ones are rather incomprehensible because he just couldn't think properly. but still, uh, so these octonian perfectoids are the same as core model theory actually over a particular set of what he calls these boundary topologies which you form, and these are actually the growth and deep topology on higher sets of ordinals iterated through higher logic. And they are actually very related to the whole thing of the infinite categories and in particular infinite topos theory. And it depends how one defines this, but one needs a natural number object, which can really only be destroyed by a higher order or lingering subcompacts. The subcompacts themselves come from worries from the horizontal level to the vertical. So that's how the world begins and ends, and it's just a matter of diamond and square over the Nocturne stuff. So yeah, so one gets singularities like this, and our brain's going to pick up those singularities of different ones in the axons and the neurons and the dendrites, topological defects or defects in the iterative space Turing machine, or defects indeed in the neurons themselves, in rather unhealthy. So yeah, basically the free energy systems of Tristan turn around and they boot you backwards. And the opposite, you get anti-Kähler manifolds. The secret, in many ways, is to form the K3 uh, documented geometry, and that will map into this high space. However, now, yeah, that's all I'll say there. But however, yeah, so yeah, that's it. So yeah, because this God prays himself, not changing himself in many ways, although healing his defect, we can perhaps place Milius as four types of inexistent God there. And in fact, the idea of resurrection, the final one. Yeah, the whole thing is resurrected. One becomes part of God if one's not left behind in a rather putrescent local system. That's why it's so important that one's prayers do actually reach God. They will eventually. God does not waste anything. He really makes it something better that you may be dissolved in, unfortunately. But it is almost a primeval chaos at the beginning, and a strangely similar thing at the end, but a sense, but with the difference in the light inside girls' isolated, vast, recursive model of constructible hierarchy, and the final thing, which is this topology which based on memoryology rather than set theory. And that is the distinction really between Rothenig's whole Moti project with the six yogas and the structure of a finite brain, which is simply about the um, what one might call the quantum geometric Langlands transform, or the spatial twist transform, etc. Or in fact, Jason's coding over the right stuff and through like Buddhist stuff. So yeah, I mean, Hellman had these mathematical structures, and he replaced numbers by these diamonds and squares of the possibility and necessity, which may well be the fine structure when we get to mentality of the cognitive mind, which sits merely inside the universe, which is a wild pig, which refers to itself and others in a myology that cannot ever be exhausted, really. And so yeah, his Hellman's diamond square mathematics without numbers may well be in some ways related to these Helmkin multiverses. In a switch, I guess I guess there will be a duality between the two approaches to set theories, and I would evoke here because I'm being rather loose and general and I'm trying to be creative as possible at the moment, not been checking details because I can't bother. But yeah, the Helmkins multiverse should really be related to Papenga, Alton set. So I would like to check that one, see the combinations of that. And that would be in fact dual to the ZFC models and the iterative hierarchy of uniqueness. Unique versus many. It's the same problem, many and unique. And it is this duality of whether you choose one one and then something else, or 1 0 1 and something else. Now that I believe is a fundamental distinction in the formation of quadratic pairs over a particular metric, which is the Minkowski metric. They form two spinors S2U2. However, it depends on how what one base was, and this would cause that um, that basic basically form different sectors in some ways. I don't know how. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it would in fact, yeah, the hyperbolic things with the with the Romanian black holes in them. Yeah, the normal one perhaps. Yeah, the normal sanity. That's the sane one. That's the sane part of the perfector Newtonian dualities. Yeah, so yeah, I suppose. Well, yeah, yeah, so yeah, yeah, so yeah, which is the mad one, I suppose. The multiverse is the mad one. The multiverse and Pepenka are the mad ones. And the number one is this straight up. If I expect if one gets into the schizophrenic point of view, one really has dots at the end. That is a perfecto Octonian, basically. And yeah, so those boundary conditions need to be met. They need to be met. The boundary conditions need to be. If they're not, then you switch over. Yeah, that is the switch. There's a switch from Papenka and Agate Multiverse to ZFC. Yeah, you flick over because you don't have what is in twistor theory called the points at infinity, the infinity twisters, which are the curvature of gravitational space. And so that's very interesting. Should we, in fact, now why do foundations with elements sit there? It's the same. You're covering these identity points with auto filters, and once you do that, you've got different auto filters, and in fact, you get the new foundations and the dendritic function. This is all very interesting. It raised different types of multiverses, even in quantum, many worlds theory and field theory, we get the same kind of duality between the curvatures and the inner black holes, which will be the negative of them, essentially, because the supercompact will induce in a day's sleep of a particular cell, if we may call that a collapse down into quadratic pairs, and those quadratic pairs actually order the new space time. The space times around you are very much different to each other. You can't see them perhaps, but they are there. They are coding one's past. And the way to do that in sheaf theory, which one needs for the higher order, the higher order infinity categories, is through these locales, which are based upon frames with points missing. And there's exactly, in many ways, in some ways at least, that Badiou developed his idea of the body, which wasn't fulfilled because he didn't seem to have a topological transform. Very interesting what he would say between his logic of the worlds, his beginning chapters, and indeed what Jensen had, his idea of worlds when he was building wooding corridors, obviously looking in the models for wooding corridors, well, pedantically, but in great detail, I suppose needed detail. But he did introduce ideas of worlds, and it'd be interesting to see how these connect with Badger's worlds, which I haven't looked at because I just skipped to the pages on the formation of the body, and his ideas aren't completely correct because he doesn't seem to understand the need for a higher order logic and topology between them. So yeah, that's it really. Now, uh, the human being, as I said, will be coded like this, etc. Yeah, yeah. So that is about it. A load of ideas, um, all connected to the Riemann hypothesis, which, well, it's not actually that difficult to to understand all these spheres in certain spaces, all these strange spheres, the hyperbolics, the nice dualities, really, those dualities. Now, these dualities, they're non-trivial. They're not going to turn back exactly to each other. They'll form quite a nice family actually. Hospital, look at these Johnny's more and the base idea, the twist is based on these 101s with something else undefinable or 1 1 something else. It was discovered in the 16th century as quadratic pair. The first one is actually has actually non-commuting variant, but the second one doesn't. I'd be interested to see what these are because they're quite simple mathematics, really. They're actually connected to the Chinese remainder theory, which is how actually Gödel coded his things. And these sequences are particular to each particular countable branch. So if we not get a global one, that's the whole point. The global one is formed by the diamond pairs, which I'm afraid resonate through building up things into building two three mega ones, uncountable number of ones into actually what would be a subcompact cardinal. These are subcompact cardinals were global covering as well. Those things global covering, but I've just invented it some time ago actually. Set claim as a global square, it fails. And that the failing of that covering is the important thing between distinguishing schizophrenia, where all the partial measures are distinct and can't be added together, or you've got a stationary set that allows you to pull them all together basically. Very nice structure between diamonds and non-diamonds, which relate to these possibly, at least nomenclature wise at least, to the to the combinal structure of these inner models, which are merely the internal logic diamonds, the internal logic diamonds of higher, higher hypotheses. It can be done in several ways. In fact, I do believe that um, Laruel's work has got something to do with this as well, in terms of whether you're forming an omega one logic or a omega one logic, or omega one logic, or omega or a two omega logic, or two logic, or a omega one logic at the end. And this is seems vital for his understanding of the larval egos, which is very interesting. So all these things are very much circulating around themselves. We need a break from it, and that would be in the Kyoto schools, for example. That is where the hyperbolic structures are more formed, not through a kind of Haufheben of what do you call them in category theory? You know, those dual things as well. I mean, yeah, so we need something different, but it should all be there. So, uh, yeah, yeah. Uh, well, anyway, um, uh, yeah. So today I've kind of threw a lot of things in the air of what I've been thinking about. Um, it's all connected in many ways to mind and scanning. Yeah, and these 4D quantum Hall systems aren't particularly well understood, but they are related to the E8 system and thereby to the co-iteration of twistor spaces. Yeah, and of course, Penka model has kind of got these gravitational stuff at the end. Yeah, so it is very interesting. And, it will, in fact, in time, uh, increase our understanding of the undetected graviton.